Welcome to another episode of On the History Trail. I'm your host and tour guide, Mark Nonstied. We're at the East Brunswick Museum and we're taking a look at one of the artifacts that we have here. This is an 1898 Edison cylinder record player, what was known as a concert cylinder record player. This machine originally took very large brown wax cylinders that would have fit right here in this location. Around 1912, when those types of cylinder records became obsolete, they switched over to a smaller cylinder record and retrofitted the machine so that it could play these smaller records. We can see here a cylinder record case, and when we open it up, inside is the original cylinder record. It would have been taken out of here and placed onto the mandrel of the machine, which we see here. And then the machine would have been hand cranked. The cylinder would spin around and the sound would come out through this large horn, what is in essence the speaker of the machine. We're going to leave the museum building and we're going to visit with Larry Levitz. Larry is a collector and restorer of these antique phonographs. We're going to take a look at the phenomenal collection that Larry has and talk about the history of these machines and what it takes to bring these machines back to working order. So sit back and relax and follow me as we travel on the History Trail. We're here talking with Larry Levitz, a phonograph collector. And Larry, you have a phenomenal collection of phonographs, which we'll get a chance to take a look at. Tell me a little bit about how you got started. How long have you been collecting these phonographs?
I've been collecting about since the third grade. I had a school teacher who had just to be brief, she had a summer party at her house. We were invited, and she had a Victrola. And I'd never seen a Victrola, and she wound it up. And as a kid, I remember looking underneath it. Where's the electricity? Stunned I was. There was no electric. How did it work, I wondered. It was just a wonder to me. A year later, my neighbor had a party, barbecue, also an antique collector, and had a phonograph like my teacher. And then that too also was a wonder of how it worked. And next to it, in one corner of the room, was a big outside horn phonograph. A Victor, and I was hooked on that. And years later, while all the kids were outside playing baseball, here I was writing to dealers, collectors, and going to the libraries and researching because there was no internet back then, and the books were basically black and white, some information, and very few.
So over the years, not only do you collect them, you've learned also to restore them back to working order. Is that correct?
Yeah. When you start collecting like this, you're always going to have one that comes looking raggedy or one that breaks. And I remember breaking my first spring, winding it, and then boom, hearing this gunshot sound. But the problem is, how do I get it working again? And I found one or two dealers who were able to do it, restoring the springs. And, well, as time goes on, you'll get 1, 2, 3, or more, and then you learn how to do it yourself.
So how many do you have in your collection now?
How many do I have? I would say roughly about 200 machines.
200 machines, okay.
I remember when I started with one.
Yeah. So tell me about the history of these machines. We all know Thomas Edison is one of the early developers of the phonograph right here in central New Jersey at Menlo Park. What other companies were involved early on?
You had the Columbia Graphophone Company started by Bell and Tainter. Mm-hmm. Charles Sumter Tainter and Alexander Graham Bell, the inventor of the telephone, worked on a machine, their version called the graphophone. Remember, if you look at the word phonograph, and graphophone is just pretty much played around. They couldn't call it the Columbia phonograph. They did later, but they couldn't steal Edison's name or coined word. So they played around and made it the graphophone. And it was patented in the District of Columbia. So it became the Columbia graphophone.
So what time period are some of the earliest machines from?
The phonograph is invented by Edison in 1877, and he receives the patent in 1878. And it's a little clad tinfoil thing, but the machines basically develop around the 1890s when they really come more to the public view, because Edison, some will argue he was not a good businessman, some will say Edison had all kinds of ideas, but he calls his phonograph the baby, his favorite. And what he does is he puts it away for about 10 years as he works on the electric light bulb. So once the invention is opened, it's like letting the genie out of the bottle. It's out there. So the Columbia Phonograph Company comes into play, or the Graphophone Company comes in. So it's actually the first machine, so I'm told, that reaches the home, and that annoys Edison. So Edison gets back into making phonographs, and it's Columbia and Edison. And by 1900, another company is formed in Philadelphia, and then comes to Camden, and that's the Victor Talking Machine Company.
And how much do these machines cost in the early 1900s?
Well, a phonograph could range anywhere from $5 to $100 back then. And it's like today, if you want to buy something plain and simple, you're going to pay less than something for a fancy gadget type of thing. So it's all according to what you can afford. If you wanted something plain and simple, you pretty much were looking about $10 to $25. If you wanted something a little fancier, $50 to $75. And if you wanted top of the line, $100 and up.
So some of them could be a substantial outlay of money for people.
Some of them were. I'm sure. I've heard many stories where people had to work literally for 3 or 4 months just to save up money, and they bought their talking machine.
Now, the earliest records were cylinder shape, and then they switch over to the flat disc. What time period does that happen?
From 1877 to about 1890 is the cylinder, and about 1900, like I said, when Victor comes into play, they have their the flat disc, the one-sided record. It's like a compact disc, one-sided, and you can only play one side. So that's pretty much around the time.
And Edison continues to produce the...
Edison is stubborn. Edison says, I'm the inventor of the phonograph. They're gonna, because I like cylinders, everyone else is gonna like cylinders. And another problem with Edison record sales is they lagged behind Columbia and Victor, because Victor had Caruso, Victor was in jazz, J-A-S-S, which later became jazz, which stems out of ragtime. And Columbia and Victor were introducing better selections, louder orchestras, and Edison, being partially deaf, heard what he heard and figured, if this is what I have to hear, everyone else has to hear it. So you could have had a perfect record, cylinder or diamond disc, and Edison would not approve it to be on the market because he heard a note different than anyone else.
Was there better sound quality on the flat disc records?
I argue this with a lot of collectors, and I still say that the Edison diamond disc player has the best sound.
Which is a flat disc.
It's a flat disc. Yeah. It's a very thick record. It's a diamond disc. It uses a diamond needle, where Victor and Columbia and other companies that followed them used a steel tip or wood needle, which those wore out after maybe 6 or 7 plays. The Edison diamond disc record, like on the cylinder players, and Columbia also used a sapphire needle on their cylinder machines, and those machines are roughly now seeing their centennials, and the needles from back then are still playing, versus a steel tip needle that you to this day have to replace.
So what's the golden age of phonographs?
I'd say around the roaring 20s. It's before radio.
So then is radio one of the competitors of phonographs?
Radio is what scared the phonograph away. Because at that time, Victor had the idea, I think you'd see the Columbia or Victor, where they were now using console models, the low boys, where you could have a phonograph here and actually put, instead of the record compartment, radio tubes, and there were some. But not every household was equipped with electricity yet, so radio was something new. And Edison, I recently read an article that Edison was asked about the radio, what he thought about it, and he said it would never take, the sound quality has to be improved, and he was like, I guess, limited, like narrow-minded, instead of like saying, hey, you know what, maybe I can do something with that.
Right. Larry, when does the phonograph start to fall out of favor?
I would say about 1929, because the stock market crash killed a lot of investors. When you have something like that, that's the last thing people want to buy is a phonograph. People are just scrounging around for money. Phonograph, in my opinion, is a luxury. You don't have to have it, but it's fun. It's an entertainment piece.
Right.
And when that hit hard, let me tell you, a lot of people felt it, and that's the last thing. They'll buy a hot dog to eat first before they buy a machine.
Right. Well, you certainly have a large, phenomenal collection of these machines. Can we take a look at them?
More than welcome to do so.
Larry, you have quite a collection of phonographs here, and I see these two earlier models here. Tell me a little bit about this one here.
This is a fancy case Victor D. Originally designed as a front mount machine, and the front mount, like the Victor trademark. Later on, it was with a back mount, rear mount. This was one of Victor's earliest fancy machines, and this probably sold for about $100 in about 1905. This was not your poor man's machine. This was a luxurious phonograph, and it was equivalent to the Victor 6, which is constructed in red or brown mahogany using gold pillars on the corners, and everything else would have been gold plated.
I noticed too it takes the flat disc, so this is a very early flat disc machine.
Yep, this is an early flat disc machine. Regular 78s, like I said earlier, well, they were one-sided, but here these are two-sided, and it would play like a regular, just like any other phonograph. You didn't control the volume because that's your volume, just the horn.
The sound coming out of the horn.
I'm sure we're all familiar with put a sock in it, where that's probably where it stems from, because you put a sock in there to lower it, and it's deafening. It will deafen and hurt you if you put your ear to it.
So right next to it, you have one of the competitors of Victor's, the Columbia.
Yes, this is the Columbia Disc Graphophone.
And what time period does this machine date
Probably
from?
about 1902, 1905, just like the Victor here. And
all of these, they're hand cranked machines. So what we're looking at on the right side of the machine, that's the crank then.
Correct. To make it go, you'd have to wind it up, because there's a spring inside that is in a coil. And when you're winding it up, it's like a slinky. It's coiled up, and then when you release the pull knob or the bullet brake, the turntable begins to spin. There's a worm gear inside. The spring starts to move, the barrel starts to move, and it builds up speed, and then count a couple of seconds, and then you lower your tone arm onto the record, and it'll play all the way through. Now, if it starts to play slowly, then you're just going to wind it some more.
So these machines from the early 1900s with these external horns, these are very characteristic of machines from that time period.
Yes, in fact, they started out with the external horn.
And then we moved down to these later versions here, these upright machines. What time period is this one from?
I would say this is about 1910, 1915, and the reason now why we have the horn is on the inside is, remember, the housewife stayed home and she did most of the work, while the male or the husband went out and had a job. So when the housewife wanted to hear music, the horn got in the way. It also sometimes became a dust collector, and some of the horns were so big they needed a room of their own. So Victor decided, well, let's satisfy the customer. Let's cut the horn down somehow and stick it into the cabinet. And these were table models, which eventually had the horn inside with the doors, and then to store records, they figured rather than have a cabinet and a machine together, unify it as to one.
So does this machine work?
Yes, it does.
Can we listen to it?
I'd be happy to play it for you. Now, as I'm winding it up, you'll hear inside there's a spring, and the spring is getting tight. And as it gets tight, or tighter, that adds more power to the phonograph. Because if I don't wind it up, it's going to sound very slow and tiresome, and then you just got to wind it up. So here's what I like to do: is I let it start up a little bit. Let's open some doors here. That's your volume control.
So the needle on these machines, it's a steel needle that they're using?
Yep, it's a steel tip needle. Just like we have here, a steel tip needle. And it, go on. And when this needle starts to wear down, it'll become flat. And that's when the record sounds fuzzy.
So you have to replace the needle.
Correct.
How many records can you play before you need to replace it?
Here's your volume control. And to answer that question, the records can last sometimes 6 playings or more. It all depends on the needle. I've had some needles that go for 3 playings, and some that'll go past 6 playings.
So it was recommended then at the time that to replace this needle after you played a couple records.
Absolutely.
And on the bottom part of the machine, you actually have storage.
Yes.
So it's sort of all built into one there.
That's right.
Storage on the bottom.
That's right. You want to store as many records as you go. You could put albums, you could put your records in. You didn't have to find a table or the closet space. You could actually have easy access where you could put your records back in or take them out for that matter. And easy to look for selections and
Great.
Location.
Now, you mentioned the Edison Diamond Disc phonograph, and is that the next model?
Yes,
here?
This is the next model.
So tell me, how old does that machine date from?
This one is about 1912, about the Titanic era. They were the next machine that the Edison company produced, because now everyone was leaving the horn phonograph era and coming into the Victrola, and the suffix "ola," referring to the inside horn, was now a common household name, like Frigidaire.
And when do these machines fall out of style?
Oh, they fall out of style around 1929, about that time period, like I said, with the stock market crash.
Right.
But they are revived during the, after 1930, when electricity now comes into play, and the companies are starting to use phonograph cabinets like these, but no more cranking. You have an electrical outlet. And I do have a Victrola I will show you.
Okay, yeah, I see you have some other machines. Can we take a look at them?
Sure.
So Larry, hiding behind these 2 large horns here are 2 cylinder record players that take these types of cylinders. What material were these made out of?
Like a plaster of Paris. That's a blue Amberol 4-minute cylinder, which is able to play on the Amberola record players, or if you had your 2-minute phonographs now set up to play 4 minutes.
They either came in 2-minute cylinders or 4-minute
cylinders.
cylinders?
The early brown wax are 2 and the brown and black wax are 2 minutes, and then later on these were more durable for holding 4 minutes worth of time. And they're the blue Amberola records, and the word Amberola stems because of the Amberola machine that Edison had. And if you didn't feel like buying a new phonograph, you could go to your dealer and have a setup, and sometimes it has an arrow, or it has a wheel that you can just click and shift the gear into 4 minutes.
So some of them could play both 2-minute and 4 minute.
Yes, you'd have to change the reproducer. So.
Now the speakers on these machines, they're very elaborately painted. Are these original?
Yes, they
horns?
are original. They're called Morning Glory horns because they resemble the Morning Glory flower, or sometimes they're known as a tulip horn. And a lot of them came in colors of blues, greens, reds, Sometimes they were sunburst color, where you just had the sunburst inside without flowers, or sometimes you had the flower arrangement going around.
So this is a tin or metal that is then hand painted in the factory?
Yeah, these were hand painted, and these were like a decal that went across the horn. They were done at the end of the line. Sometimes you had women doing them. Sometimes you had skilled gentlemen sitting there painting them, and the companies would hire good artists, and they would paint. And this is all they did, is that they would paint. These came off the assembly line. Somebody painted the horn, and then it went down to the artist.
Great. Now, can you show us the insides of a machine so we can see how they work?
That's fun to show.
Great.
I'll have
Thanks.
to show you on one of those.
Larry, we were talking earlier about how these machines worked, and you mentioned that there's a crank that's tightening these springs. Now, are the springs, they're held within a barrel? Can you point that out on there?
Here's your barrel. Looks like a tuna fish barrel. This is your crank. This is what makes your phonograph go. The crank is nothing more than a key. As you see me turning the bull gear, starting to turn here, there's a ratchet that connects here.
Okay.
And this is your governor.
And then on the far end of the mechanism, there is it connects up through the machine to the mandrel, right?
Right.
Okay.
Okay, I've just released the switch. Okay, this is your ball bearing governor, and the spring is now going counterclockwise. You wind it clockwise, now it's unwinding. And as it unwinds, it's like a clock. One thing mathematically follows the other. This is your flywheel. And this is another wheel here.
Now you can control the speed on these by adjusting the governor.
Yes,
right?
you
That
can.
would be this.
You would have your speed control here. I'm not going to do it on this one because sometimes it does throw the sound off. But if you turn it to go slower, you'll be going more into the brake here. And if you turn it opposite to go away from the brake, you'll get your speed on the phonograph. So as you see here, everything depends on something to make this thing go.
Great. So Larry, not only do you collect these machines, but you restore them as well. And I see here we're knee deep in phonograph and phonograph parts. Can we take a look at a machine that you're working on?
We have this poor baby, which this is a Model 16, a highly desirable upright, but unfortunately somebody who didn't know what they were doing, and that happens a lot, glued or incorrectly did it, causing the veneers to pop up and bubble, and
So we're looking at a machine, an upright model that we saw earlier, the style earlier, but you have it here lying on its side. In fact, we're looking at the back, right?
we're looking at the back. This is the left side, the crank side is here. It kind of looks like a beached whale, but that's because it's here for surgery, and it's here because if you can see, the veneers on this side were bubbled up. These veneers are supposed to be flat against the wood, and this is due to somebody who misglued or didn't know really what they were doing. They didn't use the proper tools to the trade, and that's just when I really wish people would call or contact somebody like myself so we can avoid these problems and just have these things properly saved.
These are the doors to the record cabinet part of the machine.
That's
okay,
the
and so
record.
historically, that's what they did then. Most of these machines were veneered.
Yeah. Let's take a look briefly.
So what material is this veneered with? What kind of wood is that?
Well, this is oak, believe it or not. Oak was a very cheap wood back in the 1900s, whereas mahogany was the top of the line. Today, mahogany is like secondary and everybody wants oak. But oak was durable, and what they did is you had your phonograph constructed of a good material like oak, and then a veneer was thrown on here because a veneer can expand and can contract through all types of weather, wood-burning stove type things, and veneers also added a touch of class.
So in some places you would cut out the veneer and then have to re-glue new strips of veneer in
Every
there.
restoration is different. You know, sometimes a piece like this has been here a long time because I do study my work, and sometimes I have to study a way, what's the best way to do it. Do I want to go through reveneering? Is it going to be costly? You know, and it's a lot of time. It can be time consuming. As much as I enjoy doing it, it also becomes a chore sometimes in thinking, what's the best route to go?
Right. So this is one of the common problems then with some of these machines, or is the veneer coming up on them?
Most of your veneers are usually popping up from the sides. That's due to natural causes like vapor or so, or sometimes they're just, sometimes you'll get a dent. Every restoration is different. There are no two restorations alike. They may look the same to you, but...
So let me ask this question. How many machines do you think you've restored over the years? Have you added that up? I mean, you told me you've collected about 200 machines. How many have you restored, would you say?
I'm estimating probably about maybe 175 at least that have come through this house and through this garage and basement.
So Larry, some of these machines, when they come to you, they have original elements to them, like these decals on them. Is it important to try and restore the machine with the original decal?
I think, well, I've learned how to do it, and I say yes. I mean, there are reproduction decals, but I don't like how sometimes you put them on and they look good, and then they start to peel and fade, and they're not as strong as a decal that's been on for more than 50 years.
So it's best to kind of keep those original elements.
I like to keep them.
So you actually sort of refinish around it, and
yeah, it's painstaking work. It takes a lot of time and patience. If you don't have the patience, don't do it. But I've mastered the technique, so I can do it practically in my sleep here. But yeah, I've had machines that sometimes the last resort is to use a replica decal because it's just beyond saving.
Right. So I guess it depends on the condition that they come in.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of phonographs will come in the rough, and sometimes the decals will be perfect, or they'll come in okay and the decals are shot.
Larry, thank you for showing us this great collection of phonographs today. I see also you sell T-shirts with labels from different records.
Oh boy, the T-shirts are my #1 sellers. There's 76 designs and about 900 more to make. Edison received 1,093 patents, and my gimmick is to make 1,093 T-shirts designs. And I'm getting there.
So where can people contact you for more information?
Just go by my business card. I have a number.
What's your telephone number?
Area code 732-297-7632.
And do you have a email address as well?
Yes, I do. ljlevitz@aol.com.
Great. Larry, can you close us out with a little song from this Victor machine
I'm sure you
here?
would like to hear it. It's a patriotic tune and probably will be another T-shirt design, Yankee Doodle Boy.